People often wonder where Eddie got his pizza. I myself was never too curious about this since we happen to be in a town where there are plenty of unopened bottles of vitamin water and canned juice. No, for me, there are tons of questions we can ask ourselves about Eddie. But the topic of today's video features another fun personal theory of mine, a mystery that I am much more invested in discussing. This mystery begins in the very first place that we meet Eddie, Wood Creek Apartment 101. Here, James meets Eddie, while Eddie's throwing up in the bathroom, feeling sick from killing a guy shortly before we got here. Silent Hill analysis videos comment on symbolism and meanings in this room all the time, but they never touch upon one of the most disturbing parts of this room and what it means for Eddie. Let's take a closer look at the victim. Notice anything peculiar? Why is he naked? Why is his naked body shoved into a fridge? When exactly did the nakedness begin? Is Eddie part of the reason why he's naked? Did his nakedness influence Eddie in some way? We will never truly know what happened and why his naked body is shoved into the fridge, but I happen to have a theory as to what went down in this room. Let's start by talking about Eddie. Eddie is a disturbed man in his early 20s. We know that Eddie is running away from the police. He killed a bully's dog, shot the bully in the knee when he came after him, and then ran off. When you think about it, he must have been standing there for a while if he watched the dog chew its insides out, and also listened to the guy crying after being shot. Anyway, since then, he's been on the run with nowhere to go. Unlike James, it quickly becomes clear that he's not actually feeling guilty, just scared and broken. When drawn into Silent Hill, he finds himself tormented by his fears. At some point in town, he sees weird-looking monsters, as well as these manifested humans that are laughing at him, though it's debatable that any of them are actually laughing at him. It's implied that the man he shot in the knee was here, not as strongly as in the remake, but we'll get into that in a bit. Eventually, Eddie finds himself in the Woodside apartment buildings. It's unclear how he got in, since James had to use the key. Maybe he snuck in while James was at Pyramid Head's threesome. At some point in his time there, Eddie runs into our naked fridge gentleman and eventually kills him. Eddie is then throwing up in the bathroom, which is how James finds him. This is the gray area and time frame that we'll be analyzing. With Eddie's background out of the way, let's take a look at the crime scene. Outside of apartment 101 is a very dirty hallway. The decaying floor is littered with footprints that seem to go back and forth down the hall and in and out of every room. There's an oil barrel and wooden planks everywhere, as well as tools and a cardboard box. The floors look like they haven't been cleaned in years. If you look closely, you'll see blood marks on the floor, all the way down and around the halls. It's faint, but visible. The apartment is mostly empty. It looks like it was being worked on because there are planks of wood and tools lying around, as though it was abandoned right before renovations began. There are paint buckets and paint rollers in the kitchen area. There's a plank of wood in the back for some reason. Empty cardboard boxes are lying around, and of course, the bloody fridge has been moved at an angle, for body placement purposes, I guess. There's a door that is unopenable, and handgun bullets on the floor, which doesn't really matter because Eddie uses a revolver while this ammo is used for James's Beretta. All of the drawers and cabinets are open, with some drawers being pulled out of them. Despite the room being dirty, there's no signs of blood anywhere but the fridge where the body is. The empty bedroom next to Eddie has walls that are covered in graffiti and football posters. There are 2 bumper stickers on the wall, one that seems to say Illusions, the water margin, which sounds relevant to the story, and the other here saying Club Inflexible Person, which sounds like the kind of club many of us join as we age. On the floor is an open magazine and a giant football. I don't know if footballs are supposed to be that big, damn. There's a single chair in the corner of the room. I'm not sure why, but its placement reminds me of a few kind of videos I may have heard about. Finally, there's a hose in the sink of the bathroom. Half of it is in the sink, the other half is on the floor. Eddie is throwing up in the toilet, which appears stained red. That's all the background for Eddie and the visible details of the apartment. So with that, let's get into my theory. I know it may have seemed like a joke that I brought up the fact that this man was naked. And part of it is. But I actually think that's a very important and also kind of funny until it's not detail in this murder. I find that most people I've spoken to about this seem to believe that Eddie has just recently killed this man, like within the last few minutes. But what if Eddie actually killed him a little while ago? maybe 30 minutes ago. I find it hard to believe that this guy was just hanging out naked, that he fought or confronted Eddie in this particular way. I also find it hard to believe that they fought in such a weird position that allowed him to be killed and shoved into the fridge like that, especially if Eddie used a gun. I believe that Eddie, while exploring the apartments, found this man in or around apartment 101. Some words were exchanged, and eventually some murdering was as well. After realizing what he had done, Eddie's mind went right to one thing: the fear of getting caught. This time, he had committed a murder. At this moment, Eddie was scared and there was nowhere to run. His van could have been spotted parked at the Overlook, and the police could be looking for him in town at this very moment. There was only one thing that Eddie felt he could possibly do in this situation. He had to hide the body. The only thing is, where could he possibly hide it? There's nothing but empty dressers in the room, and none of them were large enough to fit a human body in it. There was, however, a fairly large fridge in the kitchen. A fridge that nobody would bother checking inside of. Eddie, lacking a lot of critical thinking skills and rationale, made his decision and got to work. But as Eddie struggled, he realized just how difficult it is to stuff him into the fridge. He had to make it easier to fold the body up. He had to make space. So it was time to make this man butt-ass naked. And then back to work Eddie went. He began pushing the body into the fridge, but it wouldn't fit. It was never going to fit. Eddie wasn't this violent before, but he was desperate. So he'd keep pushing, with blood getting everywhere, the man's lifeless eyes staring at Eddie as he struggled with his corpse, until eventually something popped, or cracked, or squished in a way that made Eddie sick to his stomach. And it was then that Eddie, having had enough of the naked body, ran to the bathroom to throw up. Alright, murder fan fiction over. To summarize the above theory, Eddie took the guy's clothes off while trying to dispose of the body. When we look around the room, I see a few things that give me the impression that this wasn't just a quick and easy murder. To start, the location of the blood is both inside the fridge and outside of it. And boy is there a lot of it. The blood is only on the fridge door, in the fridge, and some on the floor. Maybe the blood on the outside is from Eddie trying to slam the door closed on the body. It's heavily pooled on the door. It's possible that Eddie was just slamming the door on the guy's body over and over again trying to close it. That blood could have gotten all over Eddie, and that's where some of the blood marks are from. The lack of blood in the room, yet on the floors outside of the room, lead me to believe that Eddie may not have killed him in apartment 101. The hallway is stained with the footsteps of workers long gone. It looks like it hasn't been cleaned in ages. It's entirely possible that he did kill the man in the room, but given the amount of trailing blood marks in the hall, I feel like it's possible that Eddie killed the man elsewhere and was looking for a place to put the body. He also could be the person who locked the courtyard and stairway door, in case anybody else could come by. Maybe he threw the clothes away into this room that has an opening at the bottom. Or maybe they're just in the fridge, all bundled up. But now you may be thinking, Eddie isn't covered in blood. That's something I thought about too, and it more or less debunked my whole theory. Until I noticed the hose in the bathroom sink. I believe that Eddie, using the tools in the area, wanted to clean up the scene a bit, but at the very least himself. Eddie is unusually wet. We always see him covered in sweat, but what if some of that was actually water he used to wash himself off? Also, if you look at the toilet he's throwing up into, it's partially stained red. That may be some of the blood that Eddie washed off of himself. The level of violence shown towards this man is also something to be pointed out. Assuming it was the bully he shot in the knee, then we know that Eddie, who is an illogical and disturbed individual, had a particular hatred for this man and his bullying. The abundance of football stuff in this room is where you could interpret that the man Eddie killed is the same football-loving bully who he shot in the knee. It's not confirmed, but based on the room and Eddie's extreme violence towards him, I'm going to make the assumption that this is who the man is. The remake goes a little further with this interpretation, but we're sticking with the original for this video. We know that Eddie was scared of retribution, to face the consequences of his actions, and that fear may have led him to make a very brutal decision on what to do with the body. After all, at this point in the game, he doesn't seem too aware of the powers of Silent Hill. He's likely still terrified of being caught, hence why he immediately starts telling James that he isn't responsible for the murder. Eddie did not feel guilt for killing this man, but rather fear that he would be caught for it. He doesn't seem to feel remorse in hurting others, as shown when he tells James how much he enjoyed killing the dog, as well as the joy he felt shooting the man as well. He's caught with his pants down by James, weak from what he'd done, and unable to defend himself. He was a murderer, though not in actuality. But in Eddie's mind, it was too late. He had gone too far. He killed a dog, he shot a man, then later finished that man off. And finally, he ripped off that man's clothes, leaving him butt-ass naked. Well, that's another fun little theory I have. I'm sure plenty of holes can be poked in it, so have at it. This theory actually just came from observing that the guy in the fridge is naked, at least from what we can see. As I sat and thought about how it would make sense that he would be naked, I came up with this theory that was actually a lot of fun to come up with. But let's be real, guys. There was no intention in Eddie's victim being naked. They just used the dead body legs that they use in several places throughout the game. They could have probably used the character models of the other dead bodies, but it was likely way harder to fit those into the scene, so they went with the naked ones. Unfortunately though, this makes it canon that the man Eddie killed was naked. They sort of changed this in the remake. Instead, Eddie just stole his shoes for some reason, and it looks like there was an actual struggle, though it still doesn't really make sense to me how he ended up in the fridge in that position. Oh well. I hope you enjoyed this one, as silly as it is. I'm not entirely sure I believe it myself, but let me know what you think. Or don't. Thanks for watching.